light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. A rather challenging and unlikely topic came to mind, and of course, being my usual sort of, well, let's talk about it, and let's not dodge the issue, let's not sidestep anything. The subject I wanted to discuss today, nudity, nakedness, the complete exposure of the human body. As an actor, in the brief time I was at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, through, I don't know if it was so much said in classes or if it was an understanding that was picked up in different conversations, the question came up, if you are ever required to be naked on stage, how do you handle it? And the understanding I developed during my time there about that sort of situation, and in seeing other people naked on stage sometimes, the understanding I developed was that this is a state of extreme vulnerability. As an actor, it is essential to do that because everything is exposed, nothing is hidden. It is essential to do such scenes with absolute integrity and honesty. You cannot be false and do such a scene well. And if the play is, if the scene is well done, if the play is well written, the nudity is never about the nudity. It's always about the emotions behind it. If you play the superficiality of the nudity, it just becomes a possibly titillating, distracting, shock value sort of thing that doesn't really engage the audience and kind of becomes irritating and demeaning and devaluing in a way. It turns the human being into an object instead of into a person. The plays that I've seen where nudity was done on stage that were the most moving was when it was about aspirations, when it was about hopes and dreams, when it was about vulnerability, when it was about relationship, when it was about acceptance or rejection, the dynamics of relationship. In a similar sort of way, I have occasionally participated in health or athletic related exercise classes and such, in which the premise was that by doing the class naked there would be a sense of community, and we would all be in this together, and there would be, because of the instant openness to each other, there would instantly be honesty and connection and community. And from the very beginning, when they kind of gave that introduction, it was hard to believe. The statement may have been wishful thinking, but if nudity were sufficient to form community, there would be community in every high school locker room. And my experience of the gym classes when I was in high school was much more so that those were intimidating and victimizing and in some cases emotionally wounding experiences. It was a kind of psychological and emotional assault, and I could not support any such choice because of how poorly it was handled. As an interfaith minister, trying to come to terms with all of this and the biblical creation story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and being naked and not being ashamed, and then shifting to a place of knowledge of good and evil and being ashamed. And what was it that made them ashamed? And why were they not ashamed before? And what perspective or understanding or state of mind could we have that would allow us to have knowledge of good and evil and not to be ashamed? For myself, the understanding I developed is to regard the body as sacred. The problem with simply saying that it's sacred is that there's a very fine line between things that are not discussed because they're sacred and things that are not discussed because they're taboo. They're wrong. They're bad. And sometimes it feels almost the same on the inside. Does that mean we should all have the freedom to go naked in public? I leave that for society to decide. I don't know that simply being naked is going to solve anything, just as in that exercise class, that, ta-da, we're naked, we're community. No, actually community is much more involved than that, and has to do with how we relate to each other. That whether we have clothes on or not, there needs to be trust. And if I'm going to be totally exposed to you, I need to be able to trust you. If you're going to be totally vulnerable to someone, you need to be able to trust them, or else don't go there. If you're going to be on stage and be naked, you have to be able to do it with complete honesty, or you shouldn't do it at all. My opinion. But yes, I feel very strongly about that. If you can't do it honestly, don't do it. You're not up to it. It's a demanding sort of scene. I recall going to a play audition for The Elephant Man once, and the script was so rich with meaning and relationship and deeply evocative and engaging scenes. It's such a powerfully written play. And there was another person at the audition who asked the director, because apparently I say apparently because the script that I read didn't mention that there was a nude scene, and apparently this other person had gotten a copy of a script that specified a nude scene. I certainly wasn't opposed to doing a nude scene, but I didn't recall there being one. But he asked the casting director, for the audition, do we have to do the nude scene? And the casting director responded something to the effect, if there's one person whom I don't want to see nude, it's you. And I was shocked, because to me that indicated that the casting director really did not have the maturity or the understanding of the sacredness of the human body to be able to do that scene well. The problem with playing it, as I said, is if you play the outside, you get this superficial caricature, and the person is reduced to an object. In order to do a play like The Elephant Man justice, you have to play the spirit of the person on the inside, and the external body simply becomes another sort of clothing that the person is wearing for the performance. The question, like any costume in any play, is, does this costume further the play? Is it necessary to the action? If it's not, there's no reason to do it. If the action or the meaning or the understanding of the story of the play would be specifically helped by being performed without clothing, then in order for the work to be the best it can be, that's what should be done. But it requires a maturity and a respect from the audience as well, that the audience be able to see what's really going on inside, and that the appearance is just an appearance. It's a human body. We all have one. I think it's unlikely that most people, anyway, throughout humanity, haven't seen a naked human body of either or both genders. And if or when that happens for the first time, to be able to address that with enough maturity and consideration and respect, that in seeing this person willing to show themselves completely to you, that you don't respond in a way that makes them feel devalued or trivialized or like a circus sideshow act, but that allows them to be a person who is respected and valued, complimented even, but in a respectful way, not a lurid way. And if the person is clearly uncomfortable, to respect that and respond appropriately also. Would you like me to get you a blanket or whatever? Depending on what situation this occurs. But it doesn't need to be a horrible, shocking, something that tells the other person it's wrong to be naked. Because it's not that it's wrong to be naked. It's wrong to use nakedness as a sort of psychological assault. It's wrong to use nakedness as a sort of devaluation of oneself or of the other person. It's wrong to use nakedness in a way that interferes with somebody else's growth or development or relationship. I would no more want to be naked in a conversation with someone who was not comfortable with it than to show up wearing a Nazi swastika when I was talking to a Jewish person. It's simple consideration for and an awareness of what serves the interaction I'm having with this person now. You know, if I'm on a beach in the summertime and everybody's swimming, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for me to show up in a fur coat and my winter ski boots. If everyone came to an affair casually wearing t-shirt and blue jeans and I showed up in a business suit, everyone might wonder why I was overdressed. It's not that there's something wrong with it, but in that sensitivity of saying, we want you to feel welcome here. You don't need to feel out of place. This is the sort of thing we're doing. We were going to play volleyball in a little bit, but I don't know if you want to get your suit dirty. Consideration, valuing and respecting each other. In deciding, you know, if someone wanted to do an exercise class or a spiritual workshop, for example, without clothing, to me it makes so much sense, and it is so important to remember the sacredness of the person, to extend to each other the consideration of feeling safe in this environment, to somehow convey that I'm not going to psychologically or emotionally victimize you. I'm not going to make negative comments about you. I'm not going to judge you because you're a perfect athlete or you're nowhere near an athlete. That's not the point. The point is interacting as people, and what can we learn from this place where we are. If we're going to do an exercise class together, within that class, to remember basic understandings, or rather that there are a diversity of understandings of personal space. That in choosing to trust someone enough to be that exposed to them, that they respond as someone who is trustworthy with that kind of exposure, and not someone who will act inappropriately, who will make inappropriate gestures, who will make inappropriate contact, but who will remember, if it's an exercise class, the point is exercise. If it's a play, the point is the story of the play. If it's a workshop, it may be about coming to healthier relationships with your own self and with how you feel about your body. It's not that there needs to be a standard of this is the good body and this is the bad body. It is, as someone has said, it's not so much where you're at as in which direction you're moving. Where are you on your journey, and are you addressing your issues? If you are comfortable or not comfortable, is there a direction that would serve you better? Do you need to become more comfortable? Are you too casual and you've forgotten that you are a sacred being, and that interacting too freely you may be trivializing yourself to where, when it really matters to say, I believe in me, you may not be able to find enough self-worth to fund such a conclusion, to support such a conclusion. To believe in oneself, one has to be able to look in the mirror with or without clothes, or both, and say, I'm a beautiful, valuable person. It doesn't mean I'm a Hollywood model. It doesn't mean I'm the most beautiful person the world's ever seen. I may not even be externally beautiful from some sort of objective measurement, but I'm the only one who should say that. And for example, I was in bodybuilding competitions, and we were on stage, and we didn't have a lot of clothing on, but we did have some, and there was a certain judging going on. But I knew in every bodybuilding competition that I entered that there had to be a recognition within myself that I was being the most beautiful me I could be in that moment, on that stage, that I'd worked very hard to be there, that I hadn't simply waltzed into it in some casual sort of way, not really caring, but that I had really applied effort and I was doing my best and presenting myself in a sense to be judged, but already having concluded that I was a winner for having done the competition in the first place. That by doing something that, except for that competition, I wouldn't have done, and by refashioning myself into a shape that I wouldn't have accomplished otherwise, I was already a winner. And standing next to guys who, some of whom had done more, some of whom had dabbled in various illegal narcotics, that for myself I was consistently always have been, always will be drug-free with regard to bodybuilding. And so the competition wasn't always fair. But being out on stage and doing that was not about the other person. It was about me and my relationship to myself. And in some of the spiritual workshops I've been to that were clothing optional, there were rituals that guided us into it, and rituals that built trust, and rituals that required respect, required mutual respect, required that we respect each other. There were rituals and guidelines and rules about how we approach each other and what we say and what we don't say, and being able to be honest and yet not in a way that was devaluing. The problem with so much aversion to nudity, and I suppose to sexuality also, is when it devalues the person and when it makes them an object, when it is no longer about respect and sacredness and consensuality, when it is about using somebody and taking something from somebody, when it is not about being consensual, when it is about being narcissistic, an imbalance, a selfishness, when it's about a dishonesty, when there are people who go to the exercise class not because they want to experience freedom or community, but because they're voyeuristic, and the other people in the room become objects to them. And the biggest problem with that, and the way that they both lose, is one person is treated as an object, and so they're not valued in the way they deserve to be. The other person, by being a voyeur, will never have the relationship with with the person at whom they're looking that they might have had. If they cannot get beyond seeing that person simply as an object, something to be shocked by or attracted by or to interact with in this or that way, if they cannot see the multidimensional person, they will miss the best part of who and what that person is. So in that sense, if it's consensual, if it's honest, I have no judgment to offer. But I think in all of these situations, we must be vigilant over ourselves. I mean, this is why Jesus talked about lusting after woman in your heart. You know, that too is sinful. That it's not that it makes you a bad person, it takes you away from being the best person you could be. To me, when I was in college, I spent a number of weeks, months actually, after learning about Socrates and Socratic dialogue, examining, in the Apology, the question that gets battered around, the Apology being a particular piece of literature called the Apology. It asks what makes piety pious, what makes piety piety, what makes it what it is, what is its essence. And in the dialogue, it basically goes to full circle, and they never do answer the question. Well, off of that, I began asking the question, what makes sin sinful? What makes it bad? Is it just the fact that it's labeled sin? I decided it was that there was something destructive, something demeaning, something devaluing, something that somehow takes away from all the beauty and the potentiality and the godliness that whatever the thing could have. When a voyeur looks at another person and thinks of them as an object, they deny themselves the richness of a mutually empowering relationship with that person. When someone lusts after another in their heart, as the biblical passage puts it, it disallows a lot of those same sort of relationships to happen. It prevents a collaborative, loving relationship. It denies them an experience of love that they might have otherwise had. And from a logical perspective, it makes no sense to be a voyeur, because you are sabotaging yourself. When you fantasize about others and turn them into objects, you are sabotaging yourself and your ability to have truly recommendable and mutually empowering and loving and exhilarating even relationship with that person. We don't need to be our own enemies. There's the old saying, we found the enemy and it's us. Should there be more nudity in the world or less? I think that's a decision for a community to make as a whole. I think there are things that recommend it, there are things that don't. I think whenever and wherever there is nudity, there needs to be a certain maturity, a breadth and depth of understanding about what nudity means. That it's virtually inseparable from trust. That the negative circumstances that sometimes occur that include nudity are not necessarily provoked by nudity, but are provoked by the attitudes and the maturity or lack thereof that we have in approaching each other as physical beings. We have bodies. That's a basic, inescapable fact. The degree to which we relate well to those bodies, and to the degree to which we relate well to other people's bodies. And sometimes when people laugh, it's because they're uncomfortable, because they haven't come to terms with it, because they haven't faced it. There was some discussion I had with a number of friends at one point that, why do people find it so embarrassing in any situation in which nudity can happen? Whether or not it should is a very personal choice. And what happens when it happens, how we respond and how we deal with the challenges in that, needs to be very much a dynamic of self-discipline and of mutual respect. That if someone feels uncomfortable in a situation, they have the right and the privilege and perhaps even the duty to remove themselves from that situation. And they don't have to make excuses either, to simply say, I don't feel comfortable, I'm leaving now. And in situations where the dynamics are not appropriate, or the ritual of building trust with the other person has or hasn't happened, to say, well then, let's make it happen. Let's be respectful. Let's remember that there is something sacred about each of us, even if we have not been honored as sacred beings in the past. We can begin now. And if there has not been an establishment of trust, we can do that now. Or we can stop what we're doing long enough to talk about this and find out whether, in all honesty, are we comfortable with this? Or are we all coming with different ideas and different agendas? It could be that that sort of discussion might even educate the voyeur into no longer being a voyeur. Rather than throwing ourselves together in this or that situation, high school locker rooms, athletic clubs, wherever, and pretending that nothing matters, that there is no value, that we are just objects. When we objectify ourselves about being naked, that could be the deepest wound of all. Even if that has happened, we can return to rediscovering that we are spirit, mind, and body, and that all three are sacred. Thank you for watching. I hope that the comments of the last half hour have been helpful to you.